The world holds its breath, eyes fixed on the Middle East as a crisis threatens to reshape global stability. A digital clock counts down the hours before a potential explosion of conflict. Former President Donald Trump has issued a 48-hour ultimatum to Iran: reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face the destruction of its energy infrastructure. The strait, a choke point for a fifth of the world's oil, is now virtually closed, paralyzing shipping and triggering the worst oil crisis since the 1970s. Families worldwide feel the pain at the pump, while governments brace for surging inflation. The US-Israeli war against Iran has already claimed thousands of lives and sent shockwaves through global markets. Trump's ultimatum, delivered via social media, leaves no room for negotiation. The world watches as two nations stand locked in a dangerous standoff, the global economy hanging in the balance. As the deadline nears, diplomats scramble for solutions, military analysts predict strike patterns, and economists model the fallout. The countdown to a new era of conflict has begun. Trump's ultimatum, delivered late on March 21, 2026, stunned the world with its uncompromising terms. He demanded Iran fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours, or face devastating strikes on its power plants. This marked a dramatic reversal from his earlier hints at de-escalation, signaling mounting economic and political pressure at home. With U.S. petrol prices soaring and public disapproval rising, Trump's move is a high-risk gamble to force a swift end to the crisis. The demand is absolute, something burning, and us. Safe passage for all vessels, no negotiation. U.S. Central Command claims to have degraded Iran's ability to attack shipping, but the strait remains perilous. The world now waits to see if this is a bluff or the prelude to a new phase of war. Trump's credibility is on the line. For Iran, capitulation would be a national humiliation. Both sides are cornered, and the 48-hour clock is ticking for the entire region. The stakes could not be higher. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most critical energy artery. 20% of global oil and much of its natural gas pass through this narrow channel. Its closure is catastrophic, not just inconvenient. Iran's military capabilities allow it to threaten or enact a closure in response to pressure, and the current conflict has turned this vulnerability into a global crisis. U.S. and Israeli strikes have halted shipping, insurance is impossible, and tankers refuse to enter a war zone. Iran claims the strait is open to some, but in reality, oil and gas flow has slowed to a trickle, sending prices soaring. Trump's ultimatum targets this choke point because reopening it is an economic necessity for the world. The continued closure risks global recession and energy shortages. For Iran, control of the strait is its ultimate deterrent against foreign intervention. Forcing it open by threat is a direct challenge to Tehran's core security doctrine. The Strait of Hormuz is now the central battleground with global implications. The world's energy supply hangs in the balance. If the U.S. strikes, Iran's power grid would be crippled, plunging cities into darkness and halting daily life. Hospitals, communications, and industry would collapse, triggering a humanitarian disaster. Iran's oil industry, dependent on electricity, would grind to a halt, deepening economic crisis and unemployment. Water shortages would follow as energy-intensive desalination and pumping stations fail, threatening millions. Public health emergencies would erupt, compounding the misery. The U.S. strategy is economic warfare. Cripple Iran to force surrender. But pushing Iran to the brink could backfire, hardening resistance and provoking desperate retaliation. The intended capitulation could instead trigger a ferocious counterattack. The risk: a nation with nothing left to lose. The threat of collapse is real, and so is the danger of escalation. Iran's response to the ultimatum is defiant and threatens regional escalation. Tehran vows that any attack on its power plants will trigger massive retaliation against energy infrastructure across the Middle East. The IRGC has declared the Strait of Hormuz will be completely closed if strikes occur, holding the global economy hostage. Iran's military command has detailed plans to target U.S. and allied energy, IT, and desalination facilities. This expands the conflict beyond military assets to civilian infrastructure, promising mutual destruction. Iran's doctrine relies on asymmetric warfare and proxy power projection. Recent missile strikes near U.S. and Israeli targets show Tehran's willingness to escalate. The ultimatum has forced Iran to publicly threaten a region-wide energy war. The path to a wider conflict is now clear. The stakes have never been higher for the entire Middle East. American allies in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, are now potential battlefields. Hosting U.S. bases, they are directly in Iran's crosshairs as it threatens to strike regional energy and water infrastructure. Key targets include Saudi oil facilities and Qatar's LNG terminals, assets vital to the global economy. A successful Iranian attack would cripple these nations, halt economic activity, and threaten the basic habitability of their cities. Panic and mass exodus could follow, unraveling decades of stability. Gulf leaders now walk a diplomatic tightrope, urging restraint while fearing the worst. Behind the scenes, frantic diplomacy seeks to avert disaster. The first missile could unleash a chain reaction, turning the Gulf's promise into ruin. The region's fate hangs by a thread. The Gulf crisis is already shaking the global economy, and the ultimatum has amplified the shock. Gas prices in Europe have surged, U.S. petrol costs have soared, straining household budgets. Analysts warn this is just the beginning. If conflict escalates, oil could skyrocket to $150 a barrel or more. Such a spike would choke global growth, fuel inflation, and risk a deep recession. Fragile supply chains would snap, and emerging economies would suffer most. The world's prosperity now hinges on decisions made in Washington and Tehran. No country is insulated from an energy war in the Middle East. The world economy is hostage to the next move. As the ultimatum's deadline nears, three futures emerge. First, controlled escalation, limited U.S. strikes, measured Iranian response. Both sides claim victory, but tensions remain high. Second, full-scale regional war, massive U.S. attacks, Iranian retaliation, Gulf energy infrastructure destroyed. Global depression follows. Third, last-minute diplomacy. Mediators broker a face-saving deal, some tankers pass, military action is averted. Each path hangs on political calculation, military readiness, and diplomatic courage. The world watches, knowing the choice will set the course for decades. It's a choice between tense status quo, devastating war, or fragile peace. The stakes are absolute. The outcome is terrifyingly uncertain. We stand at the edge of catastrophe. Trump's ultimatum has distilled a month-long conflict into a single binary choice. The Strait of Hormuz remains the flashpoint, with both sides ready for war. A U.S. strike could trigger Iranian retaliation, igniting a regional energy war and plunging the world into recession. The domino effect is clear. Leaders know the stakes, but may be unable to prevent disaster. Yet the sheer scale of potential devastation could force a last-ditch effort at de-escalation. The instinct for self-preservation is powerful, even in hardened leaders. The urgent question: if the first missile flies, can the slide into wider war be stopped? The world has only hours left to hope for peace. The answer is coming.